do this. Welcome to Be Good and Rewatch It, a Waypoint podcast where we take a close look at movies and television and examine their themes, craft, and relationship to our times. And what times these are. You may have noticed that Geeta's been absent from the podcast the last few episodes. Well, she came down with COVID-19, and much to all of our relief, seems to have gotten a fairly manageable case, and it sounds like she's going to be back next week. But we've all been stuck in varying degrees of isolation, attempting to do our part to prevent the further spread of a disease that has killed thousands and devastated both the global and local economies of our respective communities. It's a frankly frightening and uncertain time, and our thoughts are, as always, with those suffering and laboring amidst this crisis. A curious feature of this crisis, however, is that it's proven to be a weirdly prime opportunity to catch up on TV and movies. We're all stuck at home. I get out once a day to walk the dog at around 4 a.m, and it is a surreal and bizarre experience every day. And lately there's been one movie that I think a number of us at various points have been very keen to discuss. Autumn de Wilde's new adaptation of Jane Austen's Emma, starring Anya Taylor-Joy, who was the lead in 2 of the Shyamalan films we discussed during the Be Good and Rewatch It era, Split and Glass.
Oh my God.
Yeah, no, she's yeah, this is the through line.
Yeah.
Oh my God, we have a through line.
We do. We have a couple now. We have a couple, but one of them is Anya Taylor-Joy. The other is Jane Austen.
The other is today, the day that we are recording this, April 2nd, 2020. Because last year, 365 days ago to the day, is the day that we released our Be Good and Rewatch It about the 1996 Emma BBC series.
Stop it.
Rob and I recorded that and released that 365 days ago.
Not it was 2006.
It was 2006. What did I say? 1996? Completely wrong. Completely wrong. 2006. Apologies.
So damn, Johnny Lee Miller is aging like a king.
Like Good a Lord. Fine wine. That version, just want one more time before we get into anything else, just say that version rules. People should watch that version also if they're interested in Emma. And go back and listen.
I would have sworn that podcast was 3 years ago at this point.
No, it was a year ago. It was exactly 365 days.
Yeah. What has this last year been?
Good, a lot. What was this last week been? Like,
so I'm your host, Rob Zachney, and for our escape to a particularly isolated corner of 19th century England, you've already heard her. We are joined by our special guest, Natalie Watson.
Hi. Happy to be here.
Oh, it's so good to have you back. It's so good to be putting back together the Jane Austen crew. And of course, we also have Austin Walker.
How's it going? I mean, it's good. We already did a bunch of material. We talked already about how it's going. I think it ended with you talking about, well, you know what? People will have to listen to the after show to hear what we were talking about.
Wait, no, hold on. This came out. Sorry, BBC, the Be Good and Rewatch It on BBC's Emma came out April 3rd.
Sorry, yes, 365 days ago because it's a leap year. Yeah, I did this math, Cado.
Wow.
Damn.
Big brain over here.
Yeah, but it will still be releasing on the same date too. So amazing.
That's
amazing. I thought it was Monday. No, I thought this was going up today.
No,
I thought today was Monday.
It's Thursday.
I've lost track. I just because I'm working every day. I'm just doing different work every day now.
Right.
That I'm not going into an office. My week is just bruh. The only thing holding me together is on Sundays you get turnips from in Animal Crossing. That's the only thing at this point keeping my life in order. So,
thank God for those pastoral rituals.
Yeah.
And of course, we also have, heard him there a moment ago, our producer, Cado.
Hi.
All right. Well, let's get into this movie. But before we do that, let's talk about how we watched it, because this is a movie that was released in the before time. And then it was rushed to digital rental as theaters closed as this virus got further out of control. So I'm curious, what all was the context and setting of your first viewing of this movie?
Natalie and I saw it together, which was fun.
That was really fun. We saw it opening day.
We saw it opening day at the
Alamo.
It was at the Alamo, yeah, which meant
we missed the first showing because Austin was late.
I was late.
And
wow.
it was
I
fine.
left my wallet or something. I did something really stupid. I don't remember what it was, but I had to like turn around. It was not.
I was totally fine with him being late. For the record,
thank you.
You could be late anytime.
We got dinner instead. It was nice.
Yes, it was very nice. Then we had to ask someone to move their seat so we could sit next to each other in Austin, and they were nice about it and they let us do it. But then I ended up in a broken chair and I was mad.
Damn.
But then we watched the movie, and that was a cool way to watch the movie.
Yeah, it was good.
In theaters with an audience that was really there for it.
Yeah.
For sure.
How did it look like? This is a visually sumptuous film in a lot of ways. Like, how did it look on the big screen? I saw this and I was immediately kicking myself that I hadn't rushed out opening week.
I think that especially for a place like the Alamo, which prides itself on its screens and stuff, it was gorgeous. I think a lot of the color was fantastic. And I think there's lots of cinematography in this film that takes advantage of there are moments, especially I think when people are moving through the village, where it wants to give you a slightly broader feeling than what I'm used to from these historical dramas, which tend to be really, even when they're showing you the estate or something, that's the exception. But in general, it tends to feel very cramped for me, and especially in like the township, in the area where regular folks are living. I don't tend to have a good feeling for like the layout of what is happening. But the sequences in this movie of and not to get ahead of it, but like them shopping in the boutique and like watching the girls from the school walk, down the pathways, all of that stuff gave me such a great sense of openness. And I have to imagine that was enhanced by seeing it in theaters.
Yeah, I definitely felt like I had a better sense of like locale and how things were placed and how people were moving in between different places than I have in past Austen adaptations, or even just like these types of period pieces where there's like the estates and then the township, where I just have a hard time imagining where everything is happening. But I don't know if it was attributed to the fact that we saw it in the theater, but there was just I felt like I knew where I was at any given point, which I'm not really in relationship to everything else, which felt specific to this experience.
They also framed each of the scenes in town with folk music.
True.
Like you knew you were moving into a more like the more rural areas of town and stuff all the time when you would hear that song come in, even if you were still in the scene before. You knew we're moving out of the estate and into, amongst the common folk, as it were.
We have to talk about the soundtrack at some point. That's all I'll say. We'll get there.
Cado, did you also catch it in the theaters, or
Yes.
did you wait to rent it like me?
No. We my wife Christina really loves Jane Austen adaptations, so I've seen the.
What did she think of our podcast? Did she like it?
Oh my god.
What'd she say about me?
She doesn't like the BBC Pride and Prejudice. So she didn't listen to the podcast.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
So you guys like Sirius?
Oh my god.
Jesus Christ. We're gonna go through and watch all the BBC stuff now just because we have fucking time. Right? But other adaptations of Jane Austen, the movies. She also especially loves Clueless, actually. But it came out 6 days before her birthday this year. So like that was what we did for her birthday. So we went out that weekend. Nice. We went to the Alamo as well, because they're in this area. It's like one of the best I really love their projection setup. It's never done me wrong. Where I went to another theater once and it was like, wow, this ticket isn't any cheaper, but the projector sure sucks for some reason. It's really unfortunate. It was really great, and they nailed. Yeah, there's something about the color in this movie that feels heightened even for this sort of film. Like sometimes it can feel like period pieces will use these palettes but subdue them in order to make things feel old in a way. unless you're going for it in the way that like Marie Antoinette, for example, kind
I
of
was
like
gonna
leaned
say.
into it, right?
Yeah,
but, like,
and make it like a very intentional, like saturated thing. And
Right.
like this is, yeah.
I feel like this felt more naturalistic saturation though, right? Like where it's like, this is what it would have looked like at the time. Like they're not overly saturated. It's saturated to like, these are new things. This is not an old place.
Yes.
Like
Right,
these are
right. Yes.
the kind of,
Because there was this.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, like, there was this brief moment in like period pieces where I think there was almost this like overcorrection to try to make things look I don't know, it was like this weird period piece grittiness aesthetic that came in where it was like, oh no, if they're making a medieval movie, it has to be like dingy and shitty and horrible because like that's how it really was.
Right.
Oh, if you're making a piece set in like Regency England, everything should be kind of faded and frumpy and everything. It's like, no, that's what preserved items from that period look like today,
Right.
like in a museum, but that's probably not what they looked like when they were sitting in a shop window in 1820.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the credit has to go to like everything about this production is so good. I think the costume design from Alexander Byrne is really incredible, and so much about these characters is expressed through how they dress. And this is a movie that's interested in the choices they make and the considerations they take as they decide what to wear and what they want their aesthetic to be. I also think the art direction by Alice Sutton and the sets by Stella Fox are equally vivid and tie to the characterization in a way that is fairly unusual in an Austen adaptation. Like we can see Pemberley and say, that's a reflection of Darcy in the BBC one, but really that's just a place they found, right? And like that is told through a character explicitly saying, Darcy is such and such a kind of guy. And here's some beautiful music while we go through this old English show home. But in this production of Emma, the places people inhabit and the way they're designed and decorated tells us something about each one of them in a way that I find really unusual for adaptations we've seen.
What stands out for you? Like what is your call out one there? If one jumps to mind.
I think certainly the most forward one is Emma's home. It is clearly a place where she has, she even says at one point that she doesn't really want for any of the independence that a lot of women get married for because she already has it at the Hartfield estate. And so she has clearly leaned heavily into a more Louis XIV type look for her home, right? It's all painted walls and accent pieces, and it is in sharp contrast to, say, Knightley's kind of faded, like Italianate elegance in some ways is
Right.
like what Dunwell Abbey communicates.
I wonder how much that changes some of the emotional resonance of the kind of decision at the end of the film that he will move and spend time with her there instead of her doing what is the kind of traditional thing and leaving her father's home and moving in with him. I guess we should say right now, we are spoiling this movie because I just did.
Whoops.
It's Be Good and Rewatch It.
Yeah.
It is Be Good and
spoil.
Rewatch It. That is what this is. It's what we're discussing. We're discussing the whole film. That'll be the whole thing. Because I'd have to go back and watch the version from 2006, 2008, whatever it was. But I remember that feeling a lot more tenuous somehow. That like that decision felt and maybe that is about. I think specifically what it's about is. In that version, that felt like her father's house. This feels like Emma's house, and you're right. I think so much of that comes back to the set dressing, and on top of, I think, just the way that they handle her father in this leans a lot more comical and a lot more like goofy old man. Certainly still a hypochondriac, certainly still very controlling and sad, and very feels like he will be left to die alone, even if there is nothing but evidence of the contrary, surrounded by people who want to spend time with him. And yet, but here it doesn't feel like such a terrible thing. Or like it would be a question at all that of course Knightley can move here for the foreseeable future. It's fine,
It's like an eccentricity that everyone accepts, and there's like the way that everybody comes to Knightley's Bill Knight the father, I forget his
Bill
name.
Nighy, yeah.
Bill Nighy's.
His defense, like whenever nobody ever criticizes him for it, or like it is everyone always kind of
happy to move things. Yes, happy to
move things around, happy to dip from fucking dinner and just go the fuck home because it's about to snow. We gotta go. Goodbye.
We gotta go right now.
It's just it's such an incredible exit. If I ever need to leave anywhere, I'm just it's gonna snow. I need to leave.
I gotta get out of here.
But yeah, it's like a very sort of you can tell that he's revered and loved, and it's not even necessarily despite this thing. It is just an acceptance of his whole personality.
So I want to say I think it's actually I think this is one of my favorite aspects of the 2006 adaptation, because I think that one very smartly does identify there's an element of unhealthy codependence and mental illness in the relationship that Emma and her father have. And the 2006 version is very interested in that. It's also got much more room to explore it without it sort of dominating the entire story, which I think is why they went that direction. Mm-hmm. This version, I do like it, but it also does feel very much like, and it's the one really false note for me in this production maybe, is this is very much a movie that is aware that Bill Nighy has become one of those guys, right? He's almost like a Stephen Root character, where it's hey, it's Bill Nighy, here he is.
He's
hopping down the stairs.
Yeah, he literally jumps down the stairs,
which completely removes the sort of physicality of his psychological ailment, if that makes sense, right? That it really leans into he's really playing a role. It's not that he has been consumed by these feelings and by his kind of emotional state, which is, again, it's been a while since I watched the 2006 version, but in my memory, that is so much more how that felt.
Yeah, it's very much like a famous stage actor arriving in a live production, right? And pausing to let the audience applaud and cheer. That's how Bill Nighy enters this film. And it's not how he plays it throughout. But the opening of this film is very much it's Bill Nighy as Emma's dad. Isn't this great?
It's Gus Asparagus, the theater cat from Cats, except in Emma. 100%.
But let's turn to the opening of this movie, because I think the movie reveals sort of one of its major subtexts right at the start. We open on the text informing us that Emma Woodhouse has lived 21 years with very little to distress or vex her. And then we get a shot of her snapping awake in a darkened bedroom, followed by a quick sequence of her getting ready for her day, and then walking across the beautiful grounds of her estate, being guided by the light of a lantern. But she's not carrying the lantern. It's attached to a pole, being carried by a footman who is following a few steps behind her. And then she goes into her greenhouse and painstakingly selects the exact blossoms she wants cut. But she's not going to cut them herself. She's indicating to her maid, who's also been following about a foot behind her, which ones to cut. And when the maid almost gets it wrong, I was very quick to say, no, not that one. This one. And so our first encounter with Emma and our first images of this world are of this division between labor and aristocracy. And this is a theme that recurs through a lot of this picture. So I kind of wanted to start the discussion here because for much of the rest of this film, we're going to be into issues of plot and characterization. But the film chooses to open this way. And I'm curious, do you think De Wilde's Emma is really interested in class, or is it interested in how class throws its subjects into sharper relief, right? Is class just a filter it puts on to let us see Emma a little more clearly, to let us see her father to let us see her father a little more clearly?
I think it's likely the latter. I didn't leave this feeling like this had been, and I think we've gone down this road before with Austen adaptations, right? But I don't know that this felt to me like there was a takeaway around class, unless it was a sort of instructional. If you are of means, this is how you treat those without, with respect and dignity, which is not necessarily a particularly useful pedagogy, because the lessons are not about class relations. They're not really. They're about recognizing your privilege in a way in which you don't lord it over people because it will upset them, which is not really the lesson that I think is not really a lesson much at all in terms of what class is or what the class relations are. It's a message about civility and recognizing one's standing more than anything. And I think it pulls them into relief. And I mostly think it does so for comedic value more than anything else. In general, this film is extremely funny. I think this film, again, in contrast to the 2006 version, just had me laughing nonstop. I was the annoying person in the theater laughing very loudly at things that no one else seemed to find that funny, unfortunately. And I think it's the absurdity of the thing, right? Oh my God, this rich little twerp who has a footman and a maid. I can't believe her. It's that, right?
Yeah.
One of the thing.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say one of the things that I really enjoyed too about the kind of portrayal of the servants in this movie is that so often it kind of leans into that thing I was talking about, the way that they've kind of done the set dressing as well. It feels very naturalistic, where they're making mistakes and doing things and moving in a human way, where a lot of times in period pieces, if it's not about the servants, they kind of become this backdrop of look at their wealth, and they always do everything kind of perfectly. But so many times you see servants kind of being very human, even though they are still backdressing in this movie. But there's lots of really like you were speaking to at the very beginning, the kind of almost mistake that she makes, that the maid makes on cutting the flowers. There's moments where they're the two, they play it a lot for laughs with the father and the two butlers kind of moving the screens around and things like that, but in a way that I feel is maybe attempting to bring a little bit more clarity into kind of how these, it's obvious that they're kind of fed up with this ridiculousness a little bit, but they can't really be more forward about it other than giving a few glances because of what their station is, right? There are these glances that they share between each other, they roll their eyes at the father sometimes, but that's as much as there is. I don't know, there's something also kind of interesting about the scene where Knightley is being dressed. I feel there's a weird, almost there's an awkwardness there where oftentimes I feel people being dressed in movies gets played as very elegant and sensual sometimes, but something about that felt this is an intimacy that Knightley is not ready to share with people, but he's sharing it with this butler as he's putting on his stocking. I don't know, it's kind of a weird, it's a different view of that scene, I feel than a lot of period dramas.
It's very lived in a way that I think feels less like a set piece or a stage or means by which to progress the scene or whatever, where they're just doing the tasks as if there's a telepathy between them and the head of the house or whatever, and there's an actual exchange happening here that is fraught sometimes. And I think the main thing is it points out a ridiculousness that I think you're right, Austin, we're meant to laugh at, and it's played especially for laughs. But I think the sort of redeeming quality to it is that, like, we can just tell from the outset that there's, like, Emma's character is a complete brat and is, like, oblivious and is, like, a little shit. And we're like already laughing at it. So we're already kind of looking at her as unaware and, like, self-obsessed in a way that we can, I don't know, we're not really sympathizing. We're not really putting ourselves, whereas in a lot of period pieces, I think we're supposed to, like, be enamored with this, like, upper class way of living. And especially in, like, Pride and Prejudice, like, I think the only thing on screen for us to really look at is, like, this upper middle class plus upper class characters. And here we actually get the time to kind of, as an audience member, I felt more like I was one of the, viewing it from a perspective of, like, maybe the household or of, like, the common folk than anything else.
I think that's totally fair. It's almost as if the line to draw here is, like, this is not necessarily a film about class, but it is certainly a class-conscious film, or a class-conscious adaptation of the material, in the sense that what it could make invisible, it draws attention to. Now, it doesn't; those things don't cohere into a thesis about the class relations of the time.
Yeah.
Right.
Obviously, just to be 100% clear, like, I want to be clear that I'm not forgetting about the entire plot around the farmer. Like, all that stuff is there, right, but I don't think that it ends up, the sort of, like, go with the person who loves you. Hey, times are changing, and what class means is changing. Like, all that stuff is core to what Emma is, but thinking about it as a fundamental adaptation of this other work, I don't know that it ever coheres into, like, a radical text, but it is, you're totally right, I think, class conscious in terms of what it's making visible on the screen versus what other adaptations or even imagined adaptations could have made completely transparent, and especially other things other historical dramas and historical comedies in this mode have traditionally or often done in some cases.
I think by the standards of Austen adaptations, like, I think telling a story like this and at least getting the viewer to empathize with somebody outside the sphere of the main characters, like, considering the servant's perspective, is not a bad place to end up with an adaptation like
totally
this.
But that part is always with Emma, though, right? Like, Emma is already the one in which you immediately go, like, this fucking bitch. Like, I can't believe what she's done to Harriet Smith. And then the whole film is the slow build until the badly done stuff, right?
No, but I mean it a much more, like, a smaller scale version of this, which is just, we do not take for granted that these servants are part of the scenery in a way a lot of productions do, right? Like, we are forced to consider the sheer awkwardness of being witness to some of this shit. That, like, there is a moment where Emma and Knightley start to get into an argument, and the minute it begins to cross a certain threshold, the servants, without, like, just sort of, like, quickly look at each other, drop what they are doing, which is literally polishing silver. They just put everything down and get the hell out of the dining room, because they do not want to be around for whatever is about to happen. There's a few scenes where servants rapidly try to figure out, like, how do I get out of this? Because, like, I don't want to, like, I should not be here. I don't want to be a part of this moment. And yet nobody seems to acknowledge that I'm still here. So I need to get out of this. And I think that already distinguishes this treatment of it from a lot of what other adaptations have done. It's
distinguished. I'm just wary of falling into the trap of giving it kind of praise that veers on making it sound like it's radical. You know what I mean? Like, we're basically saying The Help is on screen, but, like, they don't have lines, they don't have names. There's a version of this.
But you can tell that, like, they think this is weird and
totally,
wacky,
and that's
subversive.
Something.
But it's not much. But it's
I
not
don't know
much.
that it's subversive in 2020. I
agree.
I think that it's necessary to tell this story because I think audiences would. I think that with the rest of what this story is set up, and maybe even like to some degree, I feel like those decisions feel like Autumn de Wilde saying like, all right, we can't. Like, we're not going to write a whole new script. We're not going to write Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead, but for the downstairs. But we got to put these fuckers on screen. Otherwise I can't make this fucking movie. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
But I get the arguments. I'm not dismissing the argument. I'm trying to anchor us. I'm trying not to give into astonishment. That is what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
I know it's a different show, but
yeah. I would just say that it feels very noticeable in the context of like period pieces and Austen adaptations in general, but it's definitely not revolutionary, or nor do I feel like it's really saying something substantive that would, I don't know, like I don't really think it's putting itself out on a line to be like, I get what's been done in the past, but here's how we're, yeah.
So we get through the preliminaries pretty quickly. Emma's sort of adoptive mother is getting married to Frank Weston. And sorry, I'm not sure what that is his first name. Frank Churchill is the son.
Churchill's the son. Yeah.
Yeah. What's Mr. Weston's name? It's Mr. Weston. Who cares?
Mr. Weston.
That's how he's referred to for the rest of the film.
Yeah.
But she is getting married, and Emma is once again losing a maternal figure in her life. And we go from the wedding scene which is why she was getting the flowers and what she was preparing for, very much trying to put on a brave face for something that is something of a trauma. And then we do get into our introduction of Knightley. And Cado, you alluded to it earlier. A lot of reviews of this movie mention the way he's introduced, which is that the first thing we really see of him is him naked, getting dressed and prepared to go out. And I saw a lot of people interpret this as kind of a very beefcakey introduction to Knightley, but yeah, but I'm with you. Like, I think there's a vulnerability to that scene. Like, I think the scene worked for me in that it really drives home how much of a construct is the image of a gentleman in this period, right? We see him getting out of the bath basically, and he's a little awkward, a little shy, like he's vulnerable in that way. And then the rest of that is with the help of a servant putting on all the social armor of class and status that allows him to go out and perform being Mr. Knightley of Dunwell Abbey. But what do we make of this? What do we make of this Knightley? Because at this point, we've seen many different takes on sort of the Austen romantic lead. What do we think of this introduction? What do we think of this take on the character?
I found I'm sort of poisoned in a sense because I came into this immediately after watching Johnny Flynn, who plays Knightley here, in the 2018 Vanity Fair, where he plays the like softest, kindest boy who's ever been. Dobbin. His name is William Dobbin. He is like the. I mean, I actually didn't mean that in like an insulting sense. I or like in a. I mean this in like the character William Dobbin is the like deep heart of Vanity Fair, the like unbending love, the like belief in possibility, and the sort of like the soul of this romance and this kind of tragicomedy that spans an entire Napoleonic War. And so to go from that, where I'd already been, you have to understand that Vanity Fair is like caricature work more than character work in a lot of places. And so to come from that, where he looks like he does in this. There's obviously costume differentiation. This is not a 1-to-1 in terms of time period or anything like that. But it was actually a little hard for me to buy him as harsh for that reason. Again, compared to the Johnny Lee Miller version of Knightley, here's the difference. I feel like the version of Knightley in the 2020 Emma feels a lot like the person who goes to a party who is just like bemused and kind of does not necessarily like anyone at the party, but is happy to be there still generally, right? Is like, hey, I'm in this space. The Johnny Lee Miller Knightley is this just sharp edge who, when he needs to bring that axe down, it really fucking stings. Here, I never quite bought him as adjudicator of the civil, if that makes sense. But again, I watched this a week after I'd seen Vanity Fair, in which he was literally a big golden retriever for 7 hours. Like, so it was. I want to mark that my experience is probably not universal. But people should go watch that Vanity Fair, by the way. The Vanity Fair fucking slaps. It's 7 hours. It's on, I think it's streaming somewhere. People should go look it up.
Yeah, I think that first, I definitely didn't get beefcake from his introduction. Like,
That's what Rob has written in the notes here.
I know. I need to reject that really quick. I need to go on the record rejecting him as beefcake. I think similar to what Cado was saying earlier, it felt so awkward. Like, I felt so uncomfortable watching this that I was like, I don't know. I wasn't really, it didn't have the same classic effect of like, like handsome gentleman, like period piece, handsome gentleman is the eye of everybody's apple. Wait, no. Apple.
Another way.
Yeah.
Of everybody's eye is like the object of affection for everyone in this film. When he walks in, it's just undeniable that he's just like the hottest shit in the planet. To me, like everyone in this film kind of like, it felt sort of like the veil of astonishment, like the veil of like, like look at how perfect and like beautiful everyone and everything was, has been already lifted off by like the little brattiness in the beginning, and like just I'm not sympathizing with anyone, so I'm not really like I'm not really like falling in love with anyone so far. So he's like, I don't know, it just like humbles him, not humbles him like to in my reading of him and like the way that I'm perceiving him. He's just like not this like grand gentleman as much to me, because I literally just saw him getting his pants put on. Like,
well, they saved that for Frank Churchill, right? Frank Churchill is that.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, go ahead, Cado.
Well, I was just gonna say, and during that, it's not just that it's an awkward scene. Like, he looks uncomfortable. Like he does. It's not like Emma being like nonchalant about somebody else dressing and undressing her and like not really paying attention. Like, it feels like, to me, at least the way I read it, was that like Knightley is not like this is what is done. This is what must be done. But he's too aware of the other person to not be awkward about it, right? And so like, yeah, like to me that setup read very much like this person is a little more down to earth than the other people of his class level, right? Like then immediately after,
despite being
scene,
one of the wealthiest people in all of the scenes that
right.
he's in, yeah,
right. It's more about like his thoughts about his what must be done at his class level, or like what is even like due to him. Like like I feel like some people in this are like, yeah, of course I'm gonna get dressed, and it almost feels like he's thinking like, all right, let's get this over with. Like, yeah, okay, and then you have the scene immediately after where he is like going to walk. And his mate is like, we have fucking, like, what are you doing? You have all this, you're fucking rich. Why are you walking? You know, like,
I like to walk.
Yeah.
His everything in, and this is referred to in the 2006 version as well, is a bit of a weird vibe around him and Dunwell Abbey. Like, I'm not sure I've seen the version of this that fully makes me make sense of Knightley himself, because here we also have, he's saying, don't prepare the carriage. I'm just gonna walk over to my friend's house. Don't worry about me. And then all these statues in the gallery are covered, like Dunwell Abbey, which is this home that we're told a few times, that he really does love. That you can't imagine Knightley being away from Dunwell Abbey, and hardly anybody ever gets to see it. But he doesn't really live in it.
He's not taking it in, right? It's not not like he's exploiting what he has to its greatest ends. Like, yes, I'll go do some pacing in the statuary. I'll settle in for a night of writing in the study. Like, no, like we don't really get a photo of that at all. We get a lot of him chuckling to himself. We get a lot of him. Again, I think the comparison that I was trying to make before was that the 2006 version of him is kind of, poking at things constantly, is kind of pinning, things. And this version is like literally very much like Jim Halperting, very much like laughing to himself and to the audience when the painting is revealed, when some other bullshit happens, like is in that mode to the effect that I actually just checked to see if there were compilation videos of Mr. Knightley, because this is a thing that fandom does, and I found Mr. Knightley being amused for almost 4 minutes straight, and it's just it's just all of the times that I've not watched it with audio or anything, but it is just all the times that he does the little like almost like a shrugging little laugh to himself, a look aside, a little like sticks his tongue out to like kind of just express his warmth, his like warmth and dismissal at the same time, which is a strange trait to have, but it is a very Knightley trait to have. So, anyway,
he's thinking what everybody's saying.
That's right.
It's
Unlike Jim Halpert, not secretly a piece of shit though.
True.
Jim Halpert wasn't a secret piece of shit either. We all just missed it. We all just missed. We had a blindfold on. We thought he was so funny.
A different time.
Most of us had not been in like an office workplace before and had to deal with people who thought they were the Jim Halpert of the room.
If you think you're the Jim Halpert of whatever the fuck environment you're in, just stop. Just fucking stop it.
Anyway.
Be anyone else.
Yeah.
The other thing I think they're trying to deal with here is, to me, it felt like very early on, they are trying to. This is a line that different adaptations of this story have to walk, which is, to what degree is Knightley an older mentor figure to Emma? To what degree is he the boy next door?
Yeah.
This seems to be leaning hard on the boy next door, because the first thing that happens is she basically tries to stage a scene when she sees him arriving. Like, she races over to the piano and pretends to be in the middle of practice.
That's so funny.
It's really funny.
And seems to expect that he will come over and bother her or be impressed or engage with it at all. And instead he ends up talking to her father. And she manages to play like 2 bars of music, if that, before she realizes that he's just not going to, he's going to sit there and talk to her dad. And he is not going to acknowledge that she is practicing. And she's a little bit pissed about it. And I think that's the relationship here is very much one of, they're much closer to peers than a lot of other adaptations we've seen. And even if it's not articulated yet, there is clearly not necessarily open attraction, but there is a sort of smitten quality to Emma, at least, in terms of like his attention.
Yeah, I feel like this was like one of the first things that we talked about Austen after I saw it. I was like so confused as to their relationship, and then you said they were cousins?
Like, they're cousins and he's 10 years older than her.
Yeah.
And neither of those things are clear in the film.
Not at all.
He is very much the boy next door. He's
the less said, the better, really. I think this is a smart update.
Honestly.
We've gone down this road.
If you're adapting Emma in 2020, maybe just don't get into their respective ages or what their relationship has been.
I'm good with that, honestly.
Well, this is
the retcon that we need.
It's super interesting because so much of what this story is does hinge on Knightley, does hinge on Emma wanting approval from Knightley, and him being one of the only people she wants approval from, in that way at the top of the book, and that. Oh, and also, she can't even admit to herself necessarily that she wants that approval necessarily, right. But that is how she acts, and then when he finally retracts it, is the kind of pivot point for who she is, and leads us into the final act. So yeah, I actually do wonder to some degree: is there we talked about this with the servants? Is like, is this the director and the writer being like, hey, I love so much of this story, but we cannot have an explicit like mentor-mentee relationship on screen without spending time digging into the like that dynamic in a more serious way, and I don't have the time to do that. The minute
your Emma adaptation is like trying to explain, like, no, let me explain why this isn't grooming.
Right.
And this is all cool. Like, at that point, the romantic comedy is just bleeding out. It
also I think speaks to why the top of this film feels so compressed. Again, not that the other adaptation I've seen actually spends a lot of time with who Emma was as a child, but here we get none of it really. Because the second you have to imagine her at 13, you have to imagine him at 23, and that's gross as shit, and like immediately fucks up that relationship dynamic in a way where you're like, all right, I have to. And y'all talked about this. I wasn't on this episode, but y'all talked about these elements with Clueless, which deals with some of them also, obviously. And I think that the film is stronger for just sidebarring those things. And if you can take it on its own, it can just do the romance, and it can be that these are two peers. These are two peers who are often correcting each other, who are often. Except, I actually wish there was way more banter and bickering in this version. There is not enough bickering in this version. It kills.
I agree.
Anyway,
I agree. I think given the genre of this film, like given that it's being treated very much as a light comedy, it's not really taking a hard stance on anything. It would be very difficult, I think, to like do. I think the film is better for leaving that. Like, it feels like these two people have grown up together. Yeah. It's like definitely boy next door. It's like you've spent so much of your lives together that there's like, it's a little competitive. It's all those neighbor, like,
do you think that they were
things?
Do you think that there's a version of this that they imagined even briefly that went further and literally rewrote him as just the boy next door, and then they decided to be additive by subtracting instead? That, like, because they could have just said, here is this dude who lives next to her, and they're the same age, and they've grown up next to each other, and they've been friends their whole lives. And instead of doing that, they just kind of remove those questions and let you fill in the gaps that way, which for an audience, many of whom will not have seen a previous version of Emma or have read the book, that will do the work for them, which is which is an interesting technique.
The weird thing is, though, if he's just the boy next door, it becomes a much less interesting romance in some ways. Like the obstacle in their relationship is, to a degree, they see each other in some of the narrow ways that we do when early adulthood is kind of when you have a few opportunities to redefine yourself and be like, this is how I want to be treated as a person, right? Like, I'm now my own individual agent. I have agency. Here is how I want to engage with the world. And here's how I want the world to engage with me. One of the dynamics in Emma is that they just have so much context for each other, and they have so much of their development as people has been informed by their presence in each other's lives, that I think part of what makes their relationship prickly is that, and what makes their relationship interesting as it develops, is that the thing that makes this a less natural thought to them is the fact that, to a degree, familiarity has bred contempt, right? Or that like this is not a complication they've been interested in introducing to what has been a pretty comfortable life to date.
Yeah, I don't really think you need the age dynamic to be able to accomplish that. I think we can know people, we can grow up with people, we can see like all of each other's phases, we can see like the different types of hobbies we've picked up and have dropped, and see, you know, we can watch each other go through those kinds of things and develop that, especially, you know, especially given that if they're like around the same age, like there's like this sort of competition and they're figuring it out around the same time, but they're also kind of observing each other, and that's their benchmark of like change is with each other, given that they're don't really have a lot of other peers.
It's like a
their
deeply
age.
provincial location. It's them. That's who they have. Them.
That's it. That's all you got. So to me, I can see the way that they look down on each other and then admire each other. Like that feels very natural, and it's still interesting without having like an added sort of age or power dynamic to the relationship.
Right. It's kind of the rom-com best friend in a way, almost.
Yeah.
Right. It's just like the one that isn't the object of the main character's affection, but is always there, like has been always there. Right. So I feel like that's
too many rom-coms have made that boring. I think that's why there's got to be this notion of they've been in each other's society in some other ways for years, because otherwise you are just like, you might as well have Jennifer Aniston in this fucking thing. Where it's just like
Rob's bringing all that smoke. You don't want it. You don't want it with Rob's acne.
I totally see what you're coming. I mean, I think what we're missing is what Austin was talking about before, is like that bickering is like maybe Knightley being a little bit more severe, a little bit more dismissive of her being like more disinterested in him and like ignoring him and doing things out of retaliation.
Actually,
I don't know. Like
I think this version is scared to make Knightley unlikable.
Me too.
In some ways,
100%.
it's not scared of making Emma unlikable.
No.
It goes pretty far in portraying her as pretty like. There's some pretty rough scenes with the way Anya Taylor-Joy like performs this character. It's a real good rendition. I love it.
That's so fantastic. Yeah.
Knightley's kind of an officious, superior asshole in a lot of ways. Like he thinks he knows better. Like a lot of the reason he brings out the worst in Emma at times, and in some ways also brings out the best, but he also does drive the worst because he's so fucking superior in some ways and condescending. And this version, because he's always more like chuckling to himself, he doesn't say what he's thinking. He doesn't actually condemn himself by being kind of an officious asshole in the way that really is pretty part and parcel of his relationship with Emma.
The way I've always thought about their relationship is that there is a fucked up cycle, and also it kicks off from a place of strange respect, which is why it's so hard for them to correct by the end. Knightley as a character respects Emma enough to believe that he can give her vague guidance in the form of retorts and snapbacks and like, you know, little laughs and quick judgments, and that she will do the work to fix herself as appropriate from there. That, in fact, insults her because he is not just being honest and saying what he means at any point. And inevitably, she ends up going further in a direction because there's no actual clarity there. And also, frankly, because he wants to seem disinterested and wants to seem, like you said, superior in a real way. And then, like, the big turn of this story is when he finally just says specifically what she did wrong in a scenario, instead of just saying, he doesn't just say, badly done, Emma. He says, here is what that scenario we were just in was. You know that she doesn't have what you have. You know that she feels blessed by being out here with us, and you still had to go at her twice. Like, you still had to just make her feel as small as possible. And it clicks with her because there's this moment of like actual open critique that is like, hey, here is the thing you did wrong. And it's not that she is like couldn't have theoretically gotten there herself at some point, but that is the moment for both of them where they say, oh, okay, I'm going to fix my behavior, and oh, okay, I'm going to be honest about this instead of trying to turn it into a punchline. And without having a lot of those previous instances. There are still instances of it. I'm not saying that the film doesn't do it at all. And it's a 2-hour film. It's not a 7-hour or whatever 6-hour adaptation. Right. I understand the distinction there, but without making him look like a jerk sometimes, that moment is only a moment of growth for Emma instead of also being a moment of growth for him, right?
That's very true. Oh, I have a lot I want to say about that entire scene.
Oh, we'll get there.
That scene is so much.
It's like, honestly, worst picnic in movie history.
Oh my
Picnic
God.
at Hanging Rock is better than the picnic at Box Hill. Absolutely.
So fucking good. Watching that next to Natalie in the theater was the fucking best. The whole back half of this film, from the point at which Frank Churchill arrives through the end, Rob, Cado, because you both know this story. Cado, had you already seen a version of this, or did you know the Emma story already?
We watched the Gwyneth Paltrow one before we went to see this.
So at the very least,
I should say.
Yes.
I didn't know anything about Emma.
You'd seen
going
Clueless,
into this
I guess.
movie.
You'd seen Clueless, but that's it.
I've seen Clueless, but I wasn't thinking. Did not make that connection at the time.
Sure.
I did not.
Well, because in Clueless, this scene doesn't exist.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's fucking it exists, but in like the horrible. It's the thing she says to the fucking maid.
Right.
In the kitchen,
right.
It's like small, tiny, and you barely know that character.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
What does she say to the maid?
Some racist shit. Like,
oh
that's it?
yeah,
Yeah.
it was like, I don't speak Mexican or something like that.
Uh-huh.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not the same thing.
No, it's not. It's not.
It's
They
not a
fucking totally
one-to-one.
botched that
No.
scene. It's like not at all in
Yeah.
Clueless.
Anyway, but I just want to say again, watching this film next to someone who did not know the Frank Churchill stuff, did not know the picnic scene was coming. Did not know
Here's a bold direction.
Oh, mwah, love it. Go ahead.
Here's a bold direction of this movie that I do respect it for. This is the only adaptation that makes it pretty much explicit that Frank Churchill's a murderer.
What?
So,
Excuse me?
we'll get there. We will get there.
Do we need to take a break?
Actually, we should
collect
take a quick
ourselves?
We should take a
break.
break.
I need to lay
We should take
down.
an actual break.
All right, we'll be back with more Emma after the break.